Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dom Dumas, and I'm in Bangkok. Studying Martial Arts, Episode 19. Now, at the time of this podcast, I am 45 years old, and I've been studying martial arts for almost 40 years. Off and on, of course, not consistently, but I've always been practicing in some way, manner, or form. I actually started studying martial arts when I was about 6 years old. Now, I didn't actually have any formal training at that point in time. I started off by practicing things that I saw in movies or in TV shows, in particular the TV show Kung Fu with David Carradine. Great show. And what I would do is I would see what he would do in his fight sequences, and I would try to mimic them and try to do those things like he did in the TV show or in movies, for example, like Kickboxer, which came later, or in the movie Bloodsport, or any movie like any of the Billy Jack movies, any movie that had some type of martial arts fighting in it. I always tried to mimic what they were doing in the movie or in the TV shows. And it was kind of the reason I started to learn, why I wanted to start learning martial arts at that age, is I used to fight a lot. So I kind of wanted to be a little bit of a better fighter. And then, so I started practicing these moves, and then I'd have friends, and my friends and I, we would kind of mess around a little bit, and I'd throw a few kicks, and some of them were pretty good, or what I assumed to be pretty good. And it was like, then as I got into my early teens and late teens, I started hanging around with friends that actually studied martial arts formally and in schools and in dojos. So what I started to do is I would start mimicking the movements that they would do, and I would start watching what they were doing. And when we would spar or practice kumite, and that's like not fake fighting. It is fighting, but controlled. The objective in what we used to do and what is done in most tournaments is to try and see who could touch each other the fastest. So I would kind of pay attention to what they were doing, watching them when they were working with somebody else, watching them when they were working with me, and kind of mimic their movements a little bit, and also find ways to go about how to score points on them. And I was never a very orthodox fighter. First off, to begin with, that when I was spar with somebody, I learned very quickly that everybody fights, they call it orthodox, which is like right hand first. And so, okay, left hand first, so you throw the right hand out quite fast, powerful because it's coming from way back. But I learned quite quickly that if I switch my stance, so I'm facing what they call southpaw, it really throws a lot of people off. So I tried to use that to my advantage back when I was a teenager, and it worked quite well. So, and also, like I said, I was mimicking what my friends would do. So I would do what they would do and make it work for me. And when we would spar, it would actually turn out better for me. And I could frustrate them so bad because they would start off, and we always went to 3 points, So they would score a point, then they'd score a second point, and then they wouldn't be able to score a point, and we'd go back and forth a little bit, and then I'd score a point, and they're like, they get frustrated, and then I'd score a second point, so now we'd be tied 2-2, and we'd go back and forth. And just because they got frustrated, I could use that to take advantage of the situation, and I'd be able to score the final point with them. And that was always, it was exciting for me, because being a person who never actually studied, at that point in time, never actually studied in a dojo, or studying Kung Fu, studying karate, or studying Taekwondo, or any of the forms of martial arts, it would really frustrate these people because they studied these Kung Fu, or they studied Taekwondo. Usually it was Taekwondo, or they studied karate, and I had no formal training, but I could use the martial arts that I knew and the stuff that I could mimic from them and that I've learned from watching TVs and movies, I could beat them, and that used to really irk some of my friends, unfortunately. But it was all for me, it was a part of the learning process, so studying the martial arts and kind of making everything that I learned when it came to using techniques and blocks, making it a part of me. And one of the things that I used to do is I would take, like, if I learned how to do a certain particular punch, throwing it a certain way, I would start using like a 5-pound weight to throw those particular techniques. Now, what this does, for those of you who don't know, is when you use a heavier weight, it slows down your technique a little bit, but it forces you to use more control and more power. And then when you're not using that 5-pound weight, that means your techniques are that much faster and that much quicker. Well, faster and quicker is the same thing. And they have that much more power, at least from my experience. And it was for me, it was quite fun. I mean, I studied by myself, or learning from friends, or learning from stuff I saw in movies or TV shows until my 20s. So it was for me, it was a quite exciting time, because, I mean, especially once I joined the Navy, I started meeting people from all over the United States that studied many, many, many different styles of martial arts. I started learning from guys who had studied Muay Thai, learning from guys who had studied Pseudo, learning from guys who'd studied from karate, different styles of karate like Shotokan or Kempo or Goju-ryu, and Taekwondo, Hapkido, Korean style martial arts, and different styles of Kung Fu. So for me, it was really an expanding period of time. So I was adding different techniques to what I already knew and what I had already learned. So kind of making these different techniques my own and how they worked for me, which was always fun, at least in my opinion. And then when I was in the Navy, I was stationed in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, and a friend of mine lived in Virginia Beach. So I can remember when one day I was hanging out at his place, and we went and I was driving around, and I saw this place, and it was a martial arts studio. I was like, cool, let's go have a look. So I went and I watched a class, and I was pretty blown away with what I saw in there. Now, it was I've never been a big fan of martial arts with a lot of high kicks. I've always felt that they're good and they're powerful, but if you can step inside or outside of their range, they're not as good. And I'm always a person who likes to get in close to people. So sometimes it's harder to kick somebody in the head when you're in close. But, now, not saying that the martial arts are bad. Just in my opinion, they don't work so well for me. So, but that could be just because I've studied the styles that I've studied have fit with me in that sense, versus if I had probably studied Taekwondo or Pseudo earlier or something like that with a lot of high kicks, I'd probably feel a lot different. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I went into this studio, and it was a Hapkido studio. Now, Hapkido is a form of martial arts that kind of combines the aspects of Taekwondo or Pseudo, which is a lot of kicks, and high kicks, with aspects of Aikido. So there's some grappling techniques, there's some throwing techniques, there's some joint locks and things like that, which has always been something I've always been interested in. I mean, I started learning, I learned a few joint locks because of professional wrestling. So, there's a little bit of a judo aspect in that, or jiu-jitsu, depending on how you look at it. But like I said, it was mostly, I couldn't tell you at the time exactly what I was learning from different people unless they told me. So, but in Hapkido, it was really interesting. I mean, I could still do these big jumping high kicks. I can still do them to a certain extent today. And they're fun to do for show. But when it comes to using, in my experience from learning, when it comes to using them, making them applicable to a real life situation, they don't work so well. But yeah, so I started studying Hapkido, and because of Hapkido, I started learning more about joint manipulation, about joint control, small joint control, and things like that. Now, and this was back in about 1993. And sadly, I only got to study with them for about 4 months. Now, at this particular studio, when you start out, you don't have a belt, and then you have to show that you can count to 10 in Korean and perform a few simple techniques. And I got to do that after being there for about 3 months. I got to test, and then I got my white belt. But again, I was only there for about 4 months because what happened was, while I had paid for the martial arts for, I believe I paid for 6 months, and you pay for like X amount of time or until you reach a certain level. But I ended up getting stationed, my duty station moved from Norfolk, Virginia to San Diego, California. So I kind of lost that extra time. But, you know, that's okay. I mean, while I was with them, I really learned a lot. And when I ended up going back to Norfolk, Virginia, when I had some free time, I did stop back in there to talk to them. And they said, yeah, I should have let them know that I was leaving because they would have been able to work with me. But because I didn't let them know, there wasn't a lot that they could do. I'd have to start over fresh. And I was a bit frustrated at that time. I was also a bit frustrated with a lot of things that were going on in my life at that time. And I was getting into trouble when I was in the Navy and stuff like that. So I decided not to continue with Hapkido, which is, it's okay. I mean, I really did enjoy it. And also around this time, when I came back to Norfolk, I met this gentleman on one of the submarine tenders that I was working on. And he was an instructor of Pseudo, or at least he told me he was an instructor in Pseudo. And I started working with him. And again, now the Hapkido studio was the first very formal studio that I ever studied at. But when I started studying with this guy in Pseudo, it was very, very, very informal. We would meet in the gym. We had a set. Now, we did have a set time that we would meet in the gym. We also worked together. But we would meet in the gym on the subtender, and we'd practice some techniques. We'd practice fighting techniques, and we would, we didn't do anything with katas because that wasn't his thing. And at that point in time in my life, I was really, katas really kind of sucked. They're kind of just dancing, really. But that was my belief then. But yeah, so I started working with this guy, and we started working sparring and stuff like that, and I would spar with his other guys that he was working in. And he had a bunch of guys come and watch us, which was really interesting. And then, I was sparring with this guy, and I actually did a lot better than him. And afterwards, I remember sitting down and having a drink of water and relaxing, and the guy goes, dude, you've got some talent. You should keep this up. The guy I'd never even known before said this to me. I never even met him before. He said this to me, so that was kind of interesting. But then after that, the guy that was teaching us Pseudo, he said, okay, there's a tournament coming up here in about 3 months. This guy is going to study, or he's going to participate as my black belt. And what I would like you to do is to participate in this tournament in Kumite. He wanted us Kumite, like I said, which is fighting. He wanted me to participate as a brown belt, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine, no problem. But again, I was getting into a lot of trouble at that point in time, so I didn't really get a chance to do that with him, and I ended up actually transferring to a different boat because that boat was going underway, and they wanted me to stay in port and stuff like that. And I did get a chance to work with a few Navy SEALs guys, which was a lot of fun while I was there. And eventually I did get discharged from the military, and I never really followed that, continued along with Pseudo or Hapkido. And then after I'd been out of the Navy for about a year, maybe 2 years, my ex-wife, she was my wife at the time, or she was my girlfriend at the time, we hadn't gotten married yet, she introduced me to a guy that she used to go to school with, and his name was Todd Stimmel. And I found out that, well, she introduced him to me because he studied martial arts, and he was like, and she was like, oh, you should study with him, I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And what we practiced, and I went back to formal studying with Todd, and it was the style of martial arts that I studied with Todd was Matsubayashi-ryu karate, which is a form of Shorin-ryu karate, which comes from Matsubayashi-ryu and Shorin-ryu both come from Okinawa. And it was really so different than anything I'd ever learned before. I mean, yeah, we did some kicks and we did some punches, but the way we worked things was very, very different. And we did what they call is a lot of whipping techniques. And from what Todd told me, Shorin-ryu and in particular Matsubayashi-ryu is what they call a soft style of karate. So like I said, there's a lot of whipping techniques. And using opponents' energies against them and stuff like that. So, for example, if somebody were to throw a kick, our front kick, our low block, which in Japanese is called geranbarai, which I've learned with what I'm studying now, we would throw it in such a way that we didn't actually use it to stop the kick, but we would step inside the kick and strike either at the calf muscle or the inside of the thigh with our low block. And the objective for us was you block them so hard that it hurts and they don't want to continue. So that was one of the things we worked on. So we did a lot of work with bone strengthening. So when we did hit somebody, like say we went bone to bone on the forearms, it didn't hurt us, but it would hurt them. So if somebody was throwing a punch, we specifically worked our blocks to strike in the nerve endings, particularly in the wrist or at the elbow area when you're striking, or if you went bone to bone in forearm to forearm, it would work. It would hurt them more than it hurt us, and they didn't want to continue. So this was really kind of an interesting aspect to me, which I really liked. Also, Todd really instilled in me the love of kata that I have today. And he showed me that if you take kata and you break it down, everything is there. And it was, for me, that was like a huge, mind-blowing experience, because prior to this, I thought kata was just dancing. It was like that. It doesn't do anything. It's just a series of movements to get warmed up, basically. But with working with Todd, he really showed me that kata represents fighting in specific situations. And so what you have to do is take those techniques out of the katas and practice them in fighting situations. So that, again, like I said, that was really mind-blowing for me at the time. It was like, wow, I didn't even know you could do this. And then Todd took it one step further, and he said, now what you've got to do is you got to take those basic techniques that you see in the katas, and you have to look at different ways to apply them. For example, in our first kata in Matsubayashi-ryu, the first kata is called Fuki Kata Ich. You turn, you deliver a low block, and then you stand up delivering you turn into a front stance, delivering a low block, stand up into a reverse punch, or not a reverse punch, a lunge punch in walking stance. And yes, okay, so low blocks. Low blocks are designed to stop front kicks, or not stop. Sorry, that's wrong, because you don't want to stop a kick with your arm. You'll be lucky you don't break your arm but you want to learn how to redirect or block that kick with a low block. Okay, so that's the first step, or the first two steps in Fuki Kata Ich. Now, what other aspects can you use this for? And I remember when Todd was telling me this, I was like, well, it's a low block and a punch. He said, yeah, but what else? So I started thinking about it and looking and watching Todd do the movements, and then picturing myself doing the movements, because the way him and I did the first step was slightly different, but it accomplished the same objective. So I started looking at, and I could. One of the good things is I'm able to take myself out of my body and watch myself, which it sounds kind of weird, I know. But I can look at myself kind of like watching myself in a mirror, but actually, or watching myself on video. I can see the movements that I'm doing. So I started doing this And watching Todd and watching a few of our other students while we were doing Fukikata Ich, like if I'd observe Todd doing Fukikata Ich or some of the other students doing Fukikata Ich, or I would watch myself doing Fukikata Ich. And just those first two movements. And the first step, if you just step over and turn into the low block, yes, it's a low block. But if you lunge out with your stepping leg and twist with your hips and giving more power to the turn itself, you can actually use that as a stance breaker. So if somebody's stepping in, you can kind of throw them off their balance with that particular step. Also, if you sweep the foot around, instead of stepping back, you sweep the foot around, what happens is you can sweep their front foot as they're stepping down and knock them off their feet. So to me, that was like really, I'm going to use this word again, but it was really mind-blowing. It was something I'd never seen before. I never expected to see, especially from kata. And then the first technique, obviously, after that, the next technique, which would be a punch. So you can use the first technique as a block, or you could use it as a stance breaker, or you could use it as a sweep. I was just amazed by it. And then, as you continue on, you look at the different katas and the different movements in the katas and stuff like that. And because of Todd, this was back in about 1996, 1997. Now, I studied with Todd for about a year and a half, 2 years. And it was really amazing how he taught me how to break down the katas and look for stuff that isn't obvious. So if you slightly change something just a little bit, you're not changing the kata, but you're still doing the kata, but it opens up a whole nother realm of possibilities. And I was just blown away by this. And then, like I said, I studied with Todd for about a year and a half, maybe. And while studying with Todd, I started off with a white belt. And then when I started studying with Todd, he was a brown belt at the time. I remember one time we went to Columbus, Ohio, to compete in this tournament that they had. It was an open tournament to help raise money and raise funds to this family that had lost their son through a terrible incident. And we went out to help compete in it, and Todd did really well. And I competed in it. I competed at the white belt level heavyweight division. I practiced kata. Kata wasn't very good. I had just learned Fukikata Ich, so it wasn't a very good kata. But when it came to kumite, I ended up taking first place in the heavyweight division, which was pretty cool. White belt heavyweight division. And that was quite exciting for me. And I still have I don't have the trophy here, but I have the trophy still in the States. At least I think it's still in the States. We'll see. I'll have to ask about that. But anyway, so I did well in for kumite in that tournament, and the other people that went with us, they had done really well. And then afterwards, we had a few classes at the dojo we were staying at, which would have been with Master Hickson Jr. and Master Hickson Sr. And I'll never forget Todd. Because of how I performed in the tournament and how I handled myself in the tournament and the way the other guys or the other people handled themselves in the tournament and the way Todd handled himself in the tournament, although not everybody won, we all did quite well. Todd was awarded his Shodan, which was pretty cool. And then I was awarded my yellow belt, which I was pretty excited about that. And then so that was really exciting. So seeing Todd being awarded his Shodan was pretty amazing. Having me being awarded my yellow belt, I was pretty excited about that. And then we went back to Pennsylvania, and we practiced and worked out, and we found a few new places to start practicing. We were studying at we had 2 more dojos that Todd had, which were in gyms that we were practicing at. It was pretty cool. Put on a few demonstrations, and I remember that one of the demonstrations that we put on, I was amazed because one of the demonstrations, part of the demonstration that we were doing is everybody was going to be breaking concrete slabs. Now, I'd never done any type of board breaking or any type of brick breaking or anything like that. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot. Why not? And Todd comes up to me a few days before the demonstration. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to break 3 concrete slabs. And I'm like, 3? And he's like, yeah, 3. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it my best shot, And he's like, good. That's what I wanted to hear. He didn't want me to hear me say I'd try or, oh, I don't know if I could do that. You know what? I'll give it my best shot. I'll do what I can do. When we come to the demonstration, Todd had, I believe he had 7 slabs, and this other guy, he had 5 slabs, and then I had 3 slabs. So it came time for me to come up, and I went up, and I got ready, and I got myself prepared, and I used a open palm heel strike, and hit it as hard as I could, and almost threw myself to the floor. I went through all 3 concrete slabs. I was really amazed. I couldn't believe it. And then Todd got up and was like, hey, I'd like everybody to congratulate Dom because this is the first time he's ever done any type of breaking at all. We've never practiced this. We didn't practice this in the dojo. We haven't practiced it at my house. And he just broke 3 concrete slabs. And everybody was really excited, and they clapped and they cheered me, and that was pretty exciting. And then, so that was amazing. And then we had another one where I was supposed to break 5, and I couldn't quite do it. But come to find out, one of the concrete slabs it was defective, and it wouldn't break. But still, it was really quite exciting. And then I remember we went back out to Columbus, and we had a class with Master Hickson Sr., and this was quite amazing. Studying with Master Hickson Jr. and Master Hickson Sr. and studying with Todd were all amazing times in my life. In my martial arts career, I've had some really big high points in my martial arts career, and those are just 3 of them. Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in my throat. So we went back out to Columbus, and we had another class, and after this was Master Hickson Sr., and then after the class, he was like, actually, now you should be a green belt, he said to me, and he said to this other guy that went with us, you should be a yellow belt. And he said to Todd, this person should be this, and we sat, and I was really amazed. And I can remember this so clear at this point in time, because I was still using my gi or dogi that I had I got when I was studying Hapkido. So there was this great big picture on the back of this guy throwing this great big giant kick. And Master Hickson Sr. said, you can be a green belt, but the first thing you need to do is you need to get rid of that gi with that guy throwing that kick on the back. I was like, I yanked that thing right off. And now I did have to go buy another gi, which was not a problem. So I was really excited about that. So I received my green belt for that. Now, ranking systems are different per style. So when I started studying Matsubayashi-ryu, started off as a white. Because of my performance in a tournament and how I handled myself in the tournament and with the class that we did in Columbus at that point in time, I advanced to yellow belt. And then a few months later, because of my performance in the class and the way what I was observed by Master Hickson Sr., I was awarded my green belt. So I still had never been officially tested as far as I know. So this was pretty cool. I was pretty amazed by that. And then I remember... And we go back to Pennsylvania, and we're still practicing. Todd actually decided he was going to join the Air Force. So him and I were still practicing, and I can remember him showing up at my house one day, and he's like, you've worked so hard, you've done everything I've asked of you, you're doing this, you've learned so much in such a short period of time, and he awarded me my blue belt. So I'm blown away. So this is really cool. I'm quite amazed by this. I'm so happy. And I was really sad to see Todd go away, but I was really happy that, I was doing so well in Matsubayashi-ryu. Unfortunately, I had nobody else to study with at the time. So I didn't continue with my Matsubayashi-ryu training once he joined the Air Force. Now, Todd and I have kept in touch, and we still talk today, which is a great thing. And then a few years later, I ended up moving to Thailand. which was it's still quite exciting. I love living in Thailand. But while I was here, I was working at a school, and one day I found out they had a monk that would come to the school, and apparently he taught Muay Thai. I thought that was pretty amazing. And they come up to me one day and they said, we have this monk who comes to school. And I'm like, yeah. And he teaches Muay Thai. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they said, would you like to learn? Because you like martial arts. I was like, yeah, I would love to learn. So I ended up working and studying Muay Thai from about 2005 to 2006. It was about 6 months with this guy, which was really amazing. I loved it so much, and he taught me this really important lesson about martial arts in general, and that regardless of the martial art that you study, once you get into the higher levels, higher rankings, and the deeper you go into the martial art, basically they're all pretty much the same thing. You still have kicks, you still have strikes, you still have joint locks, you still have throws. You still have pressure point strikes. You still have everything, all of this stuff. It's just the way they're used. They're used slightly different, but they're still basically the same. I thought that was pretty amazing, learning that from this monk. And also learning it from his senior student, who at the time had just won the full contact wushu competition in China. And I used to work with him. That was pretty amazing. And I really loved that time studying Muay Thai, with him, and it was great. I loved it. Like I said, it was just phenomenal working with those guys. And then once I stopped working at that school, I kind of lost base a little bit. Lost touch with martial arts for a little bit. I actually got kind of lazy when we moved to Chiang Mai. And then we moved back to Bangkok. And I can remember I was doing my yoga teacher training course. And this guy is like, hey, I know you like studying you like martial arts. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why don't you come with me? We're going to go. And I have some friends. They're part of this MMA club. Now, MMA, for those of you who don't know, MMA stands for Mixed Martial Arts, which basically means they combine different styles of fighting or different styles of martial arts to try and create a more complete fighting system, which is great. So we did a lot of grappling and groundwork and stuff like that and some strikes. And it was a lot of fun. And I studied with them for about 3 or 4 months. And I really, really enjoyed that with these guys that work out at Chulalongkorn University. And I loved it. And it was so much fun. And it pushed me like most martial arts does. And I love that so much. And then I ended up not going. I got busy, so I couldn't go there as often as I wanted. And then I found where I was studying yoga at, they put up this advertisement. This guy was going to teach a Tai Chi course, for a month. And you go for, sorry, it wasn't a month. It was like about 2 or 3 months, maybe. 2 or 3 months. And you get your first level certification for studying with him for 3 months. And, you have to talk to them. And I was like, oh, cool, this will be interesting. Yeah, it definitely would be. I've always wanted to study Tai Chi because there's something about it that just is really interesting. So I went and I studied with this guy, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. I was learning a lot. And a lot of it, for me, I noticed a lot of it was very similar to the different styles of martial arts that I had studied before, which once I start studying a martial art and I can start breaking it down, I start noticing a lot of similarities from the things that I've studied before. So I started studying as we were working with Tai Chi. Oh, I got this cough in my throat. I apologize. So, I was working with this guy, and 3 months I got my first certification. It was great. It was amazing. I loved it. And then I started continuing on. What my objective was, I wanted to get to the point where I could start teaching it myself. And the instructor and I had a little bit of a falling out. And we have talked a few times since, but he ended up dismissing me from his Tai Chi teaching because he said I had anger issues. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember ever being angry, but I do know when I'm practicing, be it martial arts, yoga, karate, Hapkido, whatever. When I'm doing something like that, I'm very, very, very intense because I'm trying to learn as much as I can about what I'm doing. So that may have been misconstrued for being angry. I don't know. But whatever, that was his choice, and I did accept it. I was upset at the time, but I've moved on since then. And I did try looking for other styles of Okinawan soft style karate like Shorin-ryu or Matsubayashi-ryu, and I couldn't find anything here in Thailand. Now I did find some Isshin-ryu, but I've never really been a big fan of Isshin-ryu. Again, there's nothing against. I have nothing against it. It's just not something that it was more Goju-ryu in style. Which is a hard style techniques. And again, there's nothing wrong. It's just not something that I wanted to study at the time. And then I remember one day, Tracy and I were coming back from Chatuchak Market, and I happened to look out the window, and here was this samurai dojo. And I was like, ooh, what's this? So I looked it up, found out where exactly it was at. It was close to the house. So I went and I went and found, we walked to it. Tracy and I walked to it. And I found out it was a Shotokan karate, which is mainland Japan style of karate. And I was like, cool. And with as little as I could talk with the instructor, because he's Japanese, and his English at the time was very, very little. He knew very, very little English. And my Japanese, I knew absolutely no Japanese. But I got to watch him teach a class for a little bit. And it seemed like this is something I really wanted to do. I wanted to learn with this instructor. So I was like, cool, yeah, I definitely want to do this. We talked to him for a little bit, and he apologized because his English wasn't very good, but that's all right. And then I went back to the States for a holiday, came back within a week. I started studying with him, JKS Shotokan Karate. I have been with JKS now for just shy of 2 years, and I just recently had a belt test with them last week. When this gets posted or published, this podcast, when you start listening to this, it will be about 2 weeks prior to this. I tested for my Shodan, which is my first degree black belt, and I passed. Woohoo! Thank you very much. And it's really exciting, and I love it, and I want to continue on with it. And again, with this, I look at, he really stresses, doesn't really stress kata. He teaches kata. He also teaches fighting. Now, he is pretty much a kumite guy. And his name is Kagawa Sensei, whose father is Kagawa Shihan, who is the current head of JKS World. That's pretty amazing. So I study with the head of JKS, Japanese Karate Shuto Federation. I study with the head of Thailand, whose father is the head of the world. That, for me, is pretty amazing. Because if you look at my martial arts career, per se, I've got to study with Master Hickson Jr. and Master Hickson Sr., who are the two highest ranked I don't know if they still are, at the time, they were the two highest ranked black belts in Matsubayashi-ryu in the United States. They studied under Master Shoshinaga Mini, who happened to be the founder of Matsubayashi-ryu. He created Matsubayashi-ryu. So I've been always studied quite close to the family tree of the style that I'm studying, which is pretty amazing. And then about a year ago, I went to England on holiday with Tracy, and I got to study. I only had one class, unfortunately, and when I go back, I really want to study with him again. But I got to study at JKS England, and the instructor for that particular class happened to be the head of JKS England, who is Alan Campbell Sensei. So this is all pretty amazing. And for me, you may think, this is really boring. But, for a person who's into martial arts, as much as I'm into martial arts, and I just love it, this is some pretty amazing stuff for me, and it's awesome. And now studying kata, again, I took what Todd taught me about kata and how to break down katas and look at them in a different way. I continue to do that today. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think my current sensei, Kagawa Tadasuki sensei, here, I think he likes how I look at katas. I know he enjoys sparring with me because I push him like he pushes me. Although he is 100 times better than I am when it comes to kumite. But I don't fight in an orthodox manner. I always try to stay inside the normal striking range to throw shorter techniques. And that could be something that I learned from Todd or that I've learned from street fighting and stuff like that. So I think my impression is that Kagawa Tadasuki sensei enjoys sparring with me for that aspect. But also when I'm practicing katas, in my head, I love to break them down and find the little, you could kind of say secret techniques or hidden techniques. They're really not. If you break them down, you'll see that they're there. You turn your hand a little bit this way and it opens up a whole new aspect of things. Just for example, a simple rising block, Jodan Ageuki. If you turn your hand, just instead of using it as a block, you can use your hand that's already up, and your raising hand, you can use it as a joint breaker, which is just another basic example of just slightly manipulating the technique. You're not changing the technique, it's just using it in a different manner. So that's one of the things I love now, that I love about kata. If you look at kata and you break it down, you find everything there. And I do love it. Okay. But I suppose I've talked on enough about martial arts, and I'm sure I have a few listeners that are quite bored, so I apologize for that. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'd like to throw some thanks out to Todd Stimmel sensei and Kagawa Tadasuki sensei for continuing my growth and keeping my desire hungry, and keeping me hungry for learning more in the martial arts instead of making it boring for me. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. I want you to always remember, what other people think of you is none of your business. So don't worry about it. All right, thanks a lot. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Please rate my show or leave a comment or make suggestions of what you would like me to talk about. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Dom Dumas, on Twitter @Dom Dumas, and on Instagram, Dom_Dumas. Thanks a lot.